What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with the overall markets. I'm going to talk about why there might be a temporary rally coming as the market already dumped so much, and especially after a reaction we could get from Nvidia's earnings. But this rally may be very, very short lived, and the market may be starting another corrective phase because of some big news that came out from Donald Trump. Now, just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY in uninvested cash. Anyways, as far as Nvidia and the market are going, Nvidia is very flat in the after hours so far. Does it have potential to rally a bit more? It still could try to rally tomorrow and beyond just temporarily. And the market may try to see a little bit of relief here. There could be a temporary rally coming as we're seeing, SPY, ES, and futures a little bit in the green. And we still have this falling wedge like setup, which could lead to a little bit of an attempt to rally. But like I said before, I'm not very confident now that this rally is going to last forever. It may just be very, very temporary before we see a bigger move to the downside. And I'm starting to hold that view because of some new pieces of news. So I'll talk about exactly why that is, why the market could see a big turn, and how things are looking right now, in my opinion. So to start things off, let's talk about Nvidia's earnings. They did very, very well. If anything, they beat EPS and revenue expectations. Revenue is at $39.3 billion for its fiscal fourth quarter. That's a 78% increase compared to the previous year. And that's a beat of expectations of $38 billion. They also beat on their EPS when it comes to expectations, and they raised their guidance to some extent. For the first quarter of 2025, we're expecting $43 billion for their overall revenue, plus or minus 2%. That's above expectations. They've ramped up their massive scale production of the Blackwell AI supercomputers, achieving billions of dollars in sales for the first quarter. And that got a lot of hype, which is very, very awesome. But it is looking like, despite the fact that people are excited about all this, much of this was already priced in, and it wasn't really enough to get investors extremely, extremely excited to see the share price go up like 10% or 5%. The share price is still flat despite all that good news. Now, could we rally a little bit more? Yes, it's possible we see a small push tomorrow and beyond, but I don't think the rally is going to last forever, especially because of what we're seeing from Donald Trump and many others. I'll talk about that in just a second. Just know that for earnings, okay, keep in mind that we actually have Dell announcing earnings for tomorrow, and that's pretty much it. I don't think Nvidia is going to save the market from what's about to come. It could help us get some temporary relief, but there's something much bigger brewing. As far as Nvidia goes, revenue's up 114%. The gross margins are actually pretty promising, not bad whatsoever. And their diluted EPS is above expectations. So a very, very good looking fiscal 2025 summary. Quite good looking numbers, if anything. Operating income is also up 147%. Looking at their data centers revenue, this is up quite a bit, continuing to grow quite a bit. It's also making up a bigger percentage of their overall revenue. Their gross margins are very complex. They're actually maintaining decent margins. They did go down just a slight, tiny bit, but not bad whatsoever. And then we also saw demand for their Blackwell being very, very extraordinary. But this is not really any new news. We already knew this. Most investors were expecting this already. And then we're looking at their overall automotive growth, which is quite good. And this is the last thing I want to talk about. Data centers are now making up the majority of their revenue. Nice growth, but you guys can see gaming revenue is a little bit short. So gaming went down a little bit, but we're seeing data center revenue increasing, and that's what's making up the majority of their revenue. That's very, very big, and it's nice to see that growth. So good job by Nvidia. So earnings were solid, good EPS, good revenue, good growth, good guidance, but that wasn't really enough to see buyers pump the share price for the short term. And then I also want to mention that if we do see some kind of rally tomorrow, a small one, the question is, can we reclaim 140? We're either going to attempt to rally a bit, which I think is very possible. And if we can't break this high right here, we could just reject and continue to dip like this. If we could break the high, however, if we end up breaking past 140, then yes, we're going to be on our way closer to 150. That would be like a more bullish outcome for the inverse head and shoulders. But now I'm looking at it like this. You could actually look at this as our resistance from here, and we're going to be watching it like this just to see if we could reclaim and break past this or not. So watch that very, very carefully. But why am I a little bit concerned about the markets? Well, the first thing worth mentioning is that tomorrow is going to be Thursday, February 27th. We're approaching the end of February, And our GDP growth rate is going to be coming out tomorrow. We're expecting 2.3%, a slight decrease compared to before. We also have some jobs numbers, so look for some GDP numbers in the morning alongside some jobs numbers at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then we have some Fed speakers like Barr, Bowman, Hammock, and Harker. We have a bunch of Fed speakers as time goes on, so keep that in mind. Now, what is concerning about the markets would be some of the things that Donald Trump has been saying. I think that this could lead to a little bit more fears. Donald Trump is saying that he wants to increase tariffs to 25% on lots of EU goods. He mentioned that he wants to do this on automotives. And then he also said that he's very convicted on increasing tariffs on Canada and Mexico. So he's talking more about tariffs. We have the March 4th deadline for Canada and Mexico. Then March 12th is when we're going to see the deadline for the steel and aluminum imports for 25% tariffs on those imports. So, next week is when we have a lot of news coming out, and he could be once again imposing these tariffs on these countries. I think that could lead to some fears for the markets. That's part of why we saw a small dip today. So we'll see what happens if Donald Trump continues to say this, especially in March, which is just a couple of days away. That could lead to more volatility or even downside for the markets. So keep that in mind. We're currently at extreme fear, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see some rally, some kind of relief in the markets temporarily, but that could be followed by more downside because of what's going on. Momentum is near support. We're at extremes in terms of all these ratios. So I wouldn't be surprised if the market rallies a little bit tomorrow, but that could be getting us ready for another corrective phase. Now, Nvidia, I'm very, very proud of their earnings, good growth overall, but this wasn't really enough to surprise investors. Much of this was already priced in. And I also want to mention that I am seeing a lot of these gaps below, right? We have a lot of gaps that are unfilled. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some kind of temporary relief tomorrow. Maybe we push a little bit because of earnings. Maybe the market rallies just a bit before this thing starts to correct and as time goes on, especially as we get close to like April. I wouldn't be surprised if we come down to fill a lot of these gaps for a corrective move. That wouldn't be a surprise to me, especially because of the fact that, the AI growth we saw, it entered a very, very big growth phase, which is what led to this massive. You could argue it's in a bubble, but that's debatable. But as time goes on, right, everything that goes up eventually has to come down, at least temporarily. And I think that that's what could be coming to the markets. I also want to mention that for SPY, we still have this giant gap to fill down here. And there's going to likely be downside coming because of the tariffs. Before we come down, though, hold on, don't become too bearish yet. It is possible we try to see a little bit of relief tomorrow. We've already dumped so hard. So as long as we could try to hold 594, we could attempt to get back up to like 598, even up to the 600s. It's possible we can see some temporary relief, but I don't think we're going to rally to new all-time highs. I think the high is in. I think what's likely is that if we do see some kind of rally to relief this downside move, that could be followed by a much bigger move back down. And as we get to March with the tariff news, we will be coming back down to fill this gap. So I hope that's as clear as possible. We could get some temporary relief back close to like the high 590s before we end up reversing and come back down to fill some of these gaps. There's a very good chance that's what's going to be happening now because Nvidia was not really the knight in shining armor to save us. That's what my view is for now. Unless we try to hold above like 602 to 605, that's going to be a very, very big difference. But my view is might be some temporary relief tomorrow. We could try to test our 200 EMA, but the move may not last. If we can't get back above like 605 or so, and even if we do somehow get up to like 605, even if that happens, I think this is a shorting opportunity. Like any rally is going to be a good opportunity for shorting because we will eventually come back down to fill that gap around 584 soon. And we might see a temporary rally first before it happens, but ultimately, I do favor that downside move. I still think there's a very, very, very good chance we're going to be seeing the downside now. Nvidia was not really doing a great job at saving us. For the QQQ, I want to mention that when you zoom out of the QQQ, if we just hide these lines, there's this gap down here to fill at 508. I think we have more gaps down here. There's one at 492. We have quite a few gaps on it. I think there's another one over here. We're not going to worry about that yet. We're just going to focus on the ones that are in like the 490s. So that shows there could be a 20-point move down coming for the QQQ or above. However, before that happens, we still have this falling wedge that's still technically present, and we'll see if we get some kind of relief move first. Sometimes that happens. There's a good chance we might do that if Nvidia rallies a bit. We already saw so much downside, so we are due for a little bit of a bounce. If we do get some kind of bounce first, that would be very nice. But ultimately, the bigger move is going to be to the downside, back down to the 490s. I do favor downside. I think we rally just a little bit. If we see a little bit of relief first, we could try to return to like 520 or so. And then we could be looking for a move right back down. That's the most likely possibility. The Russell 2000 has an inverse head and shoulders like pattern. Could this lead to a temporary rally? It's possible we try to get back towards 220 if we break past 218. But then as time goes on, I don't think the move will last, and we might be looking for that corrective phase. I think this is also going to be affected by the markets, because when you look at our daily time frame with the tariffs coming out, that could be a catalyst to start filling a lot of these gaps down here into like the 212s. I think there's even more somewhere, but I'll talk more about those later on. But if anything, I see another gap like over here that's worth watching. I do think that this might start to downtrend a bit harder. Um, you could even argue that we have kind of like a head and shoulders, but I'm not as worried about that. For now, look for some rally to the upside. We might see a relief rally temporarily to try to get back up closer to 220. And then we'll see if we get a big rejection and we see a big rug pull. That's going to be very, very important. So just keep that in mind. I'd like to see us retest 218 to 220, but then that could be us getting ready for a big move down. ES is very flat right here. Because of this falling wedge, it's possible we try to push for 6,000. Even into the low 6,000s would be very nice. I would like to see that happen. I would like to see us try to retest like 6,011, maybe see some temporary relief. And then as time goes on, I don't think we're going to surpass this all-time high or all-time highs for a good while. I think we're due for that corrective phase with the tariffs news coming, the tariff deadlines next week, right? And Donald Trump is going to probably talk a lot about those tariffs. And so we could be revisiting much lower levels. I'll talk more about the lower levels later on, but that's what my view is. Unfortunately, guys, it is what it is. We just have to be unbiased nonetheless. For NQ, okay, we have a double top leg structure, but notice we have 21,000 as our support. So I think we will eventually return to our 200 EMA in lower levels, but what's going to happen first is we might see some relief to the 21,400, 21,500 area, and then that could set us up for a move lower the closer we get to March, back down below 20,600 or below for the next corrective move. I do believe we're going to lose 21,000 soon. Whether we rally first and then dump, that's a very strong possibility. Keep that in mind. Bitcoin is looking weak. We have the potential to dip all the way down to the 70,000s if we lose 80,000. Might retest 85,000 to 87,000 before it starts dipping lower. Very strong possibility of that. For Nvidia might attempt some kind of rally towards 133 to 136, and then we could be looking for a move lower. A lot of gaps to fill on this, so be careful, guys. I would recommend just being very, very careful. I think Tesla is toast. Could we see a small bounce tomorrow? Could we try to retest 300? Maybe. Maybe it tries a little rebound, but it does not matter. We're completely losing this support, and we easily fill this gap now. I think 250 is coming pretty easily. Give it a month or two. I think we're going to be in the 250s, maybe even lower, guys. We also have another gap at 220. So expect downside for Tesla. I'm just here to give you guys an update about this, but don't worry, don't fret, don't be afraid, because it's another very good buying opportunity for the long term. When we get closer to the summer, that's when Tesla loves to rally. And I think that we are due for a bigger move down. So unfortunately, the bears have a much bigger edge. On top of this, guys, I think that other things that are going to be very important are going to involve stocks like Apple. Apple's getting a rejection here. We're looking for essentially 238. If that fails us, we're looking for a bigger move down. We'll see if we get some temporary relief here, especially as we approach the 240s. But if we fail, this could be just a lower high rejection relative to this high. And that could be a sign that this is going to turn, because this could be our lower high now. So with the Trump tariffs coming out, we'll see how that affects us if we start to see a move like this. Look for some relief tomorrow and beyond, and we'll see how we end up continuing from here. For Netflix, there's a giant gap over here. I'd be a little bit careful now. I do think this has the potential to push back up close to 1,000, but if we can't hold above 1,000, we're going to likely retest many of these lows, especially back to the 980s, so keep that in mind. MSTR, it's due for a small bounce. I do think it bounces a bit here for like 270 to about 282. And then we could be turning back down towards 250. For Celsius, we rejected. There's no sign of a nice bounce yet. Could try to get back up to the 28s before it starts to dip to fill this gap. We have a gap to fill back down to 25, so I do see it dipping more. It might bounce first before it starts dumping, so keep that in mind. Supermicro, it's dumping right now. It was not able to hold these levels. It may attempt to retest 50 before it starts to dip back down to 44. So keep that in mind. For stocks like Palantir, we're at support here. We could attempt to rally back up towards 95 before this continues to dip and to fully fill this gap back down to the low 80s. I think we will eventually dump to 80 flat, but look for a small rebound first. For Rivian, we're on a bit of a downtrend. We're making lower highs and lower lows. We're looking very weak on the daily. Could retest 11.75 before it continues to dump all the way back down towards 11. Then we could fill this gap back down to 10.24. So unfortunately, we are looking a little bit more bearish. SoFi is looking decent. This is actually looking stronger than the market. It might try to get back up to about 15.15. We'll have to see if it could hold there. We do have some gaps to fill. So this looks like it might outperform the market temporarily to get back up to 15.5 before a rejection. But just keep that in mind. Oh, but I do want to mention one thing that concerns me about it, and that's the fact that we have a possible left shoulder heading than right shoulder. So if we do see some kind of like rally like this, that could just be followed by even more downside. So just keep that in mind. AMD is on a bit of a downtrend right now, so keep that in mind as well. No sign of a major bounce. Could try to touch 107 before it continues to reject. I think we slowly downtrend for the 100s. ARM is looking weaker. We're going to be watching to see if 135 holds. If not, this is going to be at risk of dipping even more. So I still see some weakness on this chart. Coin's looking weaker. Let me just mention that this might attempt a little rebound, especially since we have a gap to fill. We're going to be looking for essentially 218 or so. If that rejects, we will continue to fall. But look for some relief right here for 218 to 221. Amazon's looking so very flat right now. We're on a downtrend. Also, keep in mind we do have a lot of gaps to fill, especially in the 190s. There's a gap all the way down to 198. So could Amazon rally a little bit? It's possible it attempts some kind of rally. We might attempt to get back up to like 215 and then 217, which is where this trend line is. So 215 could be coming. Maybe this trend line around the 218 area, but then we could reject and continue to fall if that fails us. So just keep that in mind. Meta is on a downtrend, making lower highs and lower lows, but we're trying some relief right here. So I wouldn't be surprised if Meta tries to rally more. We got to get back above 680. If that's the case, we're looking for 690 to 700 as our target for a move like this. And if that fails us, then we could be continuing to fall just like this. But that's what I'm saying. I do expect a little bit more upside. I think it's going to try to get back up to about 680, then eventually the 690s. And then we'll see if that move ends up failing us. This one I'm seeing, at least for the chart right now, we are technically on a nice uptrend as we're holding our 50 EMA. So look for some rebound. 680 could be coming, maybe an attempt to get to 690. Then we'll see how well it holds up from there. Microsoft has this falling wedge. That's a promising sign. Looking at the 4-hour, we're trying to break right here. As long as we could get back above 400, I would be looking for 402 to 405 as a target if 400 holds. But then if that rejects, we'll be looking for a move right back down to about 395. So we'll see how it goes. Keep that in mind. Google is on a bit of a downtrend. We're technically making a falling wedge-like structure. Look for an attempt to get back up to where this upper trend line is around 176, and then we'll see if we could break through this or not for a temporary relief move. If we get a break, yes, I'm looking for like the low 180s, but I'd still be very cautious with this stock, especially because it's technically on a downtrend. The falling wedge may lead to a small bounce for the 180s before it continues to dump, but unfortunately, I'm now, Nvidia is not going to save the day, right? Nvidia was the catalyst that should have helped us, but it does not look like it's going to be the one. So with the Trump tariffs coming out, I'd be very, very careful with the markets, especially for Google. For GameStop, we're kind of flat right here. We could be dipping towards 24. AMC pumped and dumped after earnings. We're looking for the low threes. DJT of all things may slowly push for 25.87. We'll see if we reject or not. One thing that is good for the markets is the fact that the VIX has like a head and shoulders. There's a left shoulder, a head, and then a right shoulder. This could dip a little bit. Maybe the market rallies a couple of points, causing the VIX to dip like this. But eventually, okay, the closer we get to March/April, we had instances where this, formed head and shoulders, came down before it started to rally again, or even this instance right here had head and shoulders and rallied again. There have been times where it rallied, came down for a couple of weeks, then came back up. So even if we do dip like this, as Donald Trump's tariffs are imposed and more fear comes back to the markets in like March/April, this could still rally again, towards April. It's still possible to get another rally, and that could be setting us up for a bigger corrective move. So that this could just be the start of this uptrend. Maybe we're about to form a head and shoulders and dip a little bit thanks to Nvidia's earnings for a temporary bounce, but I'm going to be very cautious with the markets now. Donald Trump is not giving up on the tariffs. The 10-year continues to dip as a result. That's still going to be okay, not really affecting the market as much as usual. Same thing with the dollar, it's very flat, so I'm not really too worried about this. But with that being said, guys, I thank you all so much for listening. I think we might attempt a rally tomorrow. It's going to try to rally a little bit because Nvidia had good earnings, and we might see an attempt to push a bit higher. But if we can't hold above 136, if not 140, if we come short of the trend line, see this big yellow trend line, if we can't break past that off the inverse head and shoulders, then we're not going to be in a good place, right? We had this left shoulder, the head, and then this right shoulder. We needed to see us break 140. If 140 broke, yes, this could help the market rally. But if we can't do that, if instead we kind of push a little bit and get a rejection, we come short of breaking this trend line, that could be a sign that Nvidia will pump a little bit, help the market rally a bit tomorrow, and then we could be setting ourselves up for another rejection move. Earnings were good, but they weren't really a big surprise. Much of them were already priced in by investors. And, at this point, we've already rallied so much, right? We used to be at 114. We've been uptrending technically. Now we're in a very, very critical place. So, unfortunately, this was not the best of news for the markets. The fact that Nvidia is not running very hard. Could it run a little bit? Yes, it could try to push us tomorrow. So I do anticipate some kind of upwards move, but we'll see how well the market could hold up. If it fails, we're looking for another continuation lower as the market is going to show more weakness. Look for some upside tomorrow. If SPY could get back above 599, that would be very, very nice. We might get very close to 599 and try to test it one more time. If we break that, I'm looking for the low 600s like 602 and then 603. And then if we do get back to those levels, like I said before, that would be a gift because I wish we could rally because that would be a very, very good shorting opportunity because SPY will eventually return to fill the gap at 585. It's going to come soon. There's going to be a big correction soon. We might, if we rally first, that's going to be a good opportunity. And then keep in mind that as we approach next week, Donald Trump has these big announcements with his tariffs. That's going to be all the headlines. That's going to be big for all of us. One last thing, we have GDP numbers coming out tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. alongside initial jobless claims. So we'll see how it goes. With that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. Unfortunately for Nvidia, it was not able to save us. So we're going to be in a very, very critical position. And for the market, there might be a temporary rally before we see a bigger correction, but I do believe there's going to be a correction soon now, and not even Nvidia could save us. And I also think that Donald Trump's tariffs and all these other pieces of news will have a negative effect. Thank you for listening, guys. Have a good one. We have to be unbiased no matter what. That's my analysis, at least for right now. And I'll see you guys very soon in the next one. Thank you for listening and peace out.